Hi, this is Marnie Pehrson with Ignite Point, and today I have with me best-selling author Jennifer Youngblood, the author of The Secret Song of the Ditch Lilies. And thanks for being here with me, Jen.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. All right, so I know this book's been done for a while here, but we'll dive in a little bit and talk about first your mom. You write with your mom, don't you? Y'all have
Yes,
written
I
this is
do.
the fourth book.
I do, yes. We
Yeah.
have been writing together for about a decade now, and we haven't killed each other yet, so I figure we're okay.
So how do y'all do that? How do you break it up? That always amazes me.
Well, what we usually do is we'll talk about a plot, and we talk about it pretty much in depth, and we'll plot it out, and then she will take one part, I'll take another part, and we'll kind of work on that. We compare it to making a cake. I always say, a lot of times I'll be working on the batter, she'll be working on the icing, or vice versa, and we send it back and forth, and by the end, it's sometimes hard for me to tell what I wrote and what Mom wrote. I always laugh and say, well, did you like it? Did you like that part? And if people say yes, I say, oh, I wrote that. Or if you didn't like it, oh, you'll have to talk to Mom about that. So that's kind of a running joke that we have between the two of us.
That's funny. So just blame the other person if you don't like a partner, right?
That plausible deniability factor there. It really does help, though, enhance the writing, because when you have a collaborative effort, I just find that Mom really is she really is very good at doing plots, and she has so many wonderful ideas, and that sparks something in me, and we go back and forth, and so she is a lot more concise than I am. We always say if she'd written the books, they'd be about a fourth of the size. If I had just written them, they'd be about twice as long. And judging from the size of The Secret Song of the Ditch Lilies, you can see it's good that we write together.
Well, it makes a really rich book, because I know I'm kind of like your mom. I write the shell of it, and then it'd be nice to have somebody like you come in and put the depth into it like that. So I think that's cool that y'all work together like that.
It's been a fun process.
Yeah. So how did you come up with the idea for this particular novel?
Well, this one has a really interesting beginning because, we used to live, of course, I always say I'm a Southern girl living out west now, and we were living in Tennessee at the time, and we were driving across the back area of Tennessee, which is just a beautiful area. It has all these rolling mountains and just, beautiful pastures, greenery, and I was riding, we were riding in that area I was riding with Patrick, my husband, and I looked out, and I was just really just blown away at the beauty of the area, and I said, Patrick, is this not gorgeous? I just can't believe how beautiful this landscape is. And he kind of looked back and forth, and he said, well, all I've seen for the past several miles have been a bunch of trailers, pines, and power lines. And so that was where we first thought of the idea, and we had first thought about naming it that. And then everyone kept saying, well, good luck with your trailer book. And so we decided to change the name, but it was one of those things that I called up Mom and I said, hey, do you think that we could write something about trailers, pines, and power lines? I kind of would like something, to write something about our growing up years and kind of incorporate it. And she said, yeah, I can write that. Mom, that's always Mom's approach. She's like, oh, sure, I can do that. So that's how it got started.
Cool. Yeah. So the book has been done for a while, right? Because I got to read one of the earlier versions of it.
Yeah.
So why did it take a little while on it to get it into print?
Well, that's a very good question, Marnie, and you're right. It's been done for several years. We finished it. I'm thinking it was around 2008 or 2009, and it was very lengthy. I think it was something like around 168,000 words, which is really, really long for a novel. I know when you get into fantasy novels, people can go on and on, but for the type of novel that it was a little bit lengthy, and so we kind of toyed with it a while. We talked about maybe taking portions of it out, condensing some of it. We talked about maybe it is two different stories woven together. So we thought, well, maybe we separate the stories, and we just could not bear to do anything to it because we really felt like that. Okay, it's finished. It's how we want it. It's how the story should be told, and so we kind of put it on the book. Kind of put it on the back burner, and that was one reason. The second reason is a little bit more personal, is because this book is really, really important to me. I think I really resonate a lot with the characters, and kind of a lot of the ways that these characters grew up, or how I grew up. And I think when you release something so personal, it becomes hard. Sometimes you want to hold on to it because, as you know, as an author, when you write something, it's completely yours. You have control of the whole world, the whole universe, and then when you release it to the public, it becomes everybody else's. And I think part of me was not ready to release it. I just felt like I wanted to hold on to it a little bit longer.
That makes sense. So why did you decide to break it into 2 books?
Well, just for the very reason I was talking about. It is very long, and so I was concerned that people would feel bogged down and that people would be intimidated by that. I think people will always read a novel if it's a blockbuster, author, or if it's fantasy, they'll say, oh, we don't care how long it is. If it's Harry Potter, it doesn't matter if it's 1,000 pages, but when it's another author, when it's a little bit lesser known subject matter, sometimes that can be intimidating. So we decided to break it into 2 parts to make it easier for our readers, and to also give us the opportunity for promotion. It's nice to be able to promote 2 that go along. People seem to like series, and they like, part 1 and part 2. So that's why we did that.
Smart move. Yeah. So is that you on the cover, or?
That is a very good question. I always get asked that, and when we first kind of put up the test cover, we had all this response on Facebook, and people are like, is that you? I'm not sure if that's you, but it kind of looks like you. And at first I kind of dodged around, and evaded answering the question, but yes, it is me, and no, it isn't me. I was the model that was used for the photograph, but it has been tweaked considerably to match the features of Delia, the main character. I feel like, of course, you're getting a biased opinion, but I think my features are a little softer than Delia's. I feel like she's kind of a superpower woman, and because of things that have happened to her, she had to get tough at a very young age. And so she's a little bit harsher, I think. At least that's how I see it.
Well, your cover guy did a good job of turning you into a little bit more of a steely person there. You get that intensity in your eyes in that picture on the cover.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you named the town Tick Ridge. Where did you come up with that?
Well, we wanted to do something that was so outlandish and over the top, that was so uniquely Southern. And my mom used to work at the University of North Alabama in Florence, and there's a friend of hers who's also a very popular English professor there, and I think he's recently retired. But we were having lunch with him, talking about some of our other books, and he suggested that we use the name Tick Ridge, because he said that that's actually the name of a community in Alabama, and it got its name, ironically, from the Union soldiers. They called it Tick Ridge, and it had nothing to do with ticks. He really couldn't give me an answer of why it was called that, but that's kind of how the community became, that got its name. And so in our book, we decided to pick that name because it almost sounds ridiculous when you first look at it. You're like, really, a town named Tick Ridge? And we've got it on the town city limits, where when Sybil, his daughter, ends up going to Tick Ridge, they have a kind of a sign that says, yes, that is our name. And throughout the novel, you have the old-timers and the newcomers, and they're always battling over the name. The old-timers want to leave the name, and the newcomers want to keep, they want a new name that sounds that kind of thought of that resistance to change, and it just seemed like a fun thing to incorporate into this novel.
Cool. So tell us about the characters.
Well, the characters, the main character, well, there really are 2 main characters. The very main character, her name is Delia, and she is a middle-aged woman, and she's a socialite living in Atlanta, and she has got a daughter named Sybil who is also grown, and she's trying to mold Sybil into her debutante life, and Sybil wants nothing to do with it. So that's where the novel begins. And so you have this conflict between mother and daughter, and Sybil feels like that her mother doesn't understand who she is, and that her mother's always trying to pin her down and make her into this Stepford wife, like she feels like her mother is. And then when a tragedy happens in Sybil's life, she decides to flee that life in Atlanta. She really doesn't like it to begin with, but she's been willing to put up with it. She's for her husband and for her mother, and so she decides that she's had enough, and so she flees and she moves to this town called Tick Ridge, and in the process, you start finding out a lot about Delia and a lot about Sybil, and you realize that things really aren't as they appear to be on the surface. So it's kind of this play between the appearance on the outside and then what the person really is on the inside, because I think we all kind of have that dual persona where we portray ourselves one way, but yet we're really something else inside. And so it's the interaction between the mother and the daughter, and it also the book goes back and forth between the past and the present quite a bit as well.
Yeah, so you mentioned you identify a little bit with characters. Which one and why?
I would say that I identify with Delia first and foremost, and the reason I identify with her is because she grew up a lot like I did. They grew up very poor, didn't have a whole lot, and she always wanted to be something more than she was, and not necessarily something more on the inside, but she just wanted the opportunities that she felt like that other people had. Just a kind of a funny little tidbit. I remember when I was in high school, and back then, before the age of computers, you would go in and sit down with your guidance counselor, and your guidance counselor would sit down and kind of plan out your map. She would look at all of your school history from your kindergarten through senior year, and so I went in with a friend of mine, and she was kind of looking through all of our records, and she kind of paused and looked at me, and she said, "Jennifer, do you mind if I ask you a favor?" And I said, "Sure." She said, "I was looking through your old school records from when you were in elementary school, and then I was comparing them with your records now, and she said, I wondered if you would mind if I made a poster of you before and you after, so that we could give all these other underprivileged kids hope." So, and of course, my friend was appalled that she would even suggest such a thing, but I kind of laughed because I knew exactly where I had come from, and I knew the obstacles that I had to overcome, and so I think in that manner, I really, really identify a lot with Delia. Sometimes I identify with Sybil. I don't like the constraints of living in I don't know what you would call a high society life. I feel like I've lived in a lot of areas that were kind of like that, and I did not like that. I like the freedom of being able to be who I am, do my own thing, not be judged for how much money I make or what kind of car I drive. And so in that regard, I identify with Sybil. But I say mostly Delia, and also Delia has a younger sister that she's responsible for. And me being the oldest and having a younger sister, I think that kind of resonated with me as well. Delia is very prim and proper. She has a very set idea about what people should not do, what she should and should not do. Her sister is the complete opposite. She's not restrained by anyone's perception, anyone's belief. She's just herself. And I think that my little sister's a lot like that. And as the older sister, I was always trying to keep her in line. And so that reminds me of growing up. There are some big differences in the characters. Paige and I had a wonderful growing up experience. Now, we were poor, we did have a hard time financially, but our mom did marry a wonderful man who really raised us to a large degree. And so I kind of took our situation and I thought, what would happen if you had two little girls who weren't so fortunate as we? And what if you put them in that situation? And what if the mother was weak? Then what would happen? So that was the beginning premise for the novel.
Cool. I'm curious what your sister thinks of it.
She really loves it. I was trepidatious to give it to her. She read it about the same time that you did, and she just loved it. And you're always a little bit worried when you write something so personal about how that person's going to feel about it. But Paige is such a wonderful person. I really admire her free spirit, and I admire that she's not afraid of anything. She just tackles everything head on, and that's exactly how these characters are. So I think we laughed and we saw a lot of ourselves in the characters.
Cool. So the snake handling, a little bit of a dark element there. Why did you include the snake handling in it?
Well, growing up in rural Alabama, we had always heard about snake handling. And we had neighbors that I really can't say for sure whether they did or did not handle snakes. They never handled them while we were there, but they were of the holiness faith, and that's part of their faith is to handle the snakes. And so we would often go to their church meetings. The church meetings that they had were never held at a building. They couldn't afford a building. It was usually a few families, family members that were related, and that had that same belief, and they would meet together at different people's houses. And so we really took a lot of those meetings from our experiences and what happened and how they worship, but then we incorporated the snake handling element. And no, I have actually never been to a snake handling meeting. I don't know. I've thought about it. I probably would like to, but I don't know if I would never get close enough to the snakes. I'm enough like Delia. I would stay as far away as I possibly could. But I've done quite a bit of research and watched a lot of videos. The world of the internet now is wonderful because we can do a lot of research and we feel a little bit more protected. I didn't have to go physically to that meeting, but since I've been to so many of their worship services, I really felt like I was there when we were writing it. I really did feel like it was right there with me.
Cool, cool. So the book is currently only available on Kindle. Are you going to put it into print, you think?
I think eventually we will. We decided this time to do this one this way. I know so many people, there's that battle going on, ebooks versus print books, and it's always a difficult call. We really wanted to make this one available. We felt like we had waited long enough, and so eventually I think it will come out in print, but that may take a little longer. So we wanted to go ahead and make it available now to everyone, and then always leave the option open to go ahead and put it into print. We have had a few of our readers that have been really upset that it's not into print, and I completely understand that, especially people who have a hard time reading. If they have a hard time reading a screen, that makes it a little more difficult. So, but for now, we're just going to go with the ebook and kind of see where that takes us.
Well, I love the book. It's like one of my all-time favorite books, and I don't read long books, but you're right up there with Atlas Shrugged, which is the only long book that I read. So,
that is a high compliment, Marnie. That really is. Well, it has been a wonderful experience. I really have. I mean, every book that we write, we really get immersed in it, and the characters become so real. These, I guess the only difference is these didn't have to become real because they're real already. I mean, these characters are right here for me, and I think they always will be. The funny part about it is I think I've told you this before, but when we were editing it and putting it into ebook form, I'm reading the whole second half just bawling. My eyes are swollen, and I had to laugh. I felt like I was like that girl in Romance in the Stone where she's sitting at her typewriter just crying, and then of course I start laughing because I feel like an idiot. And it'll be interesting to see if other people are as touched by it as I am. I mean, I know it is a lot more personal for me and close, but I really was touched by these characters. And I have loved going back and revisiting this book because anytime you edit it, work on cover, it's like you're right back there with it. And I've missed them. And it's been wonderful to go back and kind of be a part of their world for a little while.
Yeah, your characters as an author start to become like friends, don't they?
They do. The most wonderful thing about writing, especially with my mom, is that I'll call her up, we'll be writing and we'll say, "You will not believe what such and such did. He is such a scoundrel." Just wring his neck. And then we laugh, but they do become real. They do. They become very real to us. I just hope one day I don't get, Alzheimer's or dementia, then I'll be having all these people right around me.
That's true. As you mentioned that, I compared it to Atlas Shrugged, only in the length, and it's not about the plot line or anything like that. But similarly, the characters, I love the characters in Atlas Shrugged. They become real and you really care about them, and your book does the same thing. I think the hallmark of a really good book is if you can bring those characters to life where you really feel like you know them by the end.
Thank you. Well, it's been interesting because I felt like we really had a lot of inspiration, a lot of prayer, a lot of thought went into this novel, and I think another reason maybe too why I had a hard time releasing it, because I felt like, okay, it's done. Our work is done. We've released the novel that kind of encompasses all of our other novels, and what else is there to write? And so it took me a little while after writing this one to get back into the writing process. And of course now I'm very excited about continuing and doing other things and getting involved in other plots. But I think for a while that one for me was the end all be all. And I was like, okay, it's done. Now what do we do?
So what are your newest projects? What novels or projects are you working on right now?
Well, right now we're working on a few different things. First and foremost, of course, we have the Paper Rose Club, which is a series, and that one's fun. It's more of a cozy mystery romantic comedy. It's about four best friends and a lifetime of memories. Of course, there's a secret that rocks their world and rocks the town, and there's an affair involved and a mystery lady. But so we have got a series that we're working on for that, and we've got the second one in the series called The Honeysuckle Inn, and that one we're working on really, really hot and heavily. My mom especially, she really resonates with those characters, and so she's working on that, and I'll end up helping her, and we'll go back and forth like we always do, and finish that up. So that's coming in the very near future. We have a lot of people asking about that one all the time, and I promise all the readers it is coming. We are getting it out pretty soon. And then we also are putting Living in High Cotton into ebook form. That one's coming out soon, and so we're excited about that. And then we turned our sights to something a little bit different. This one's kind of new, and it was intimidating at first, but we are doing a young adult fantasy as well that we're making into a series. And of course this is a completely new genre for us, but it's been a lot of fun. I've really been enjoying it. The series is called The Grimm Laws, and it's a retelling of a fairy tale. I know those are very popular now, and it goes back and forth between the real world and the fantasy world, and so the gist of it is what happens if Cinderella falls in love with the wrong guy. She doesn't fall in love with the prince, then what happens? That's kind of the gist of that one. And then we're working on a couple, we always have a lot of projects. I think the thing is we have so many projects that we're working on. It's just trying to decide, okay, which one are we going to focus on and get out now? So, but those are our main ones that we're doing at present.
Cool. All right, so Burned, you also released too. You re-released one of the books.
Yes.
Did you mention that already? And I just
No. We didn't mention. I didn't mention that. Yes, and I know there have been a lot of questions about, well, why did you change the title? Because this was originally Stoney Creek, Alabama, and a lot of people have wanted to know, well, why did you redo the cover? Why did you change the title? And the short answer is well, we finally got the opportunity to do it the way we wanted to. When Living in High Cotton and Stoney Creek, Alabama first came out, they were published through a traditional publishing company, and we really didn't have a lot of say in what we wanted to do. And so our original working title for Stoney Creek, Alabama was called The Sawmill, because the bulk of the action takes place around the sawmill. And then the publisher said, oh, that sounds a little bit grisly to me. I think it sounds too much like a horror novel. So he says, I think we need a new title. So we went through about 100 different options and finally settled on Stoney Creek, Alabama. I came up with Stoney Creek, and he wanted to add the Alabama, and because he felt like that would resonate with readers, that they would see Alabama and want to pick up the book. And I was fine with that. I know this sounds piddly, but I really just didn't want a comma in the title. So when we got ready to redo it, we have a lot more say, and so we said, okay, we're going to make it Burned. This is something that we would have picked. And then, of course, that has meaning literally, and it has meaning figuratively. And I liked the cover of Stoney Creek, Alabama, but I really like the Burned cover a lot more. I just think it fits the content of the book. So I feel like for the first time that we that now the title and the cover reflect the content of the book more aptly than they did before.
Cool, cool. So what are some of your greatest challenges as a writer?
Well, the greatest challenge I face is not being able to hole up in the cabin. I think when I get involved in a project, that's all I want to do. And I'm a little bit envious of these writers. You know, I hear these writers that say, "Oh, I spent the week in I spent the week in this place or this place, formulating my novel." Well, as a mom, I don't really have that luxury, and I've thought about it a lot, and it'll be interesting because if I ever do get that luxury, I'm afraid I'm going to run into this huge writer's block where I'll have this whole week and then I won't be able to do a thing because my writing is done in snatches. When the boys were little, living in High Cotton, I was homeschooling my two boys. And so I would do things with them all day, and, we'd do our school, go to the park, do different things, and then in the evening I'd find myself writing. And it really hasn't changed that much now. It seems like I always have 200 things I have to do, and only time for 50, and I think that's the way everybody's life is. But that's my biggest challenge, is trying to fit it into a busy schedule and trying to make time for it. And also, I think I'm also the typical writer where I do get writer's block quite a bit. I don't think Mom has ever gotten writer's block a day in her life. I don't think she's not inhibited at all. She can always write. The ideas always flow. For me, I really have this. It's a struggle sometimes. Sometimes I feel like I can't put two sentences together, and I think I'm never going to be able to write again. And then it comes. It's like anything. The more you do it, it comes. But for me to really get into a novel, I do have to be more regimented, and that is really difficult to do on a tight schedule. So I just have to carve out that time and make it a priority. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of people could probably relate to that who are writers. So if you could share one thing with your readers, what would it be?
Well, I just want to thank everyone for supporting us. It is so wonderful when we put up a new book, when we put out a new book, and when we have those people who tell us, you always have the people who say, "Oh yeah, it was okay, maybe it wasn't my favorite," but then you get that person that really, really loved it, and it just changes everything. And I always tell people to as far as to other writers, I always tell them to write what they know and maybe try to turn off that critic. Because I think sometimes as writers we are so critical that we really can't create. And the critical part of us, if we're not careful, will snuff out the creative part of us. And so I always encourage people to write first, and you can always read, you can always edit it. Good fiction's edited 1,000 times. I mean, we know that. But yeah, I guess if I could say anything, I would just like to thank our readers, because we have had so much support over the years, and it has been a wonderful process. And when we get that person that tells us that they read something that has changed them, then it makes all the difference.
Yeah, great. All right, well, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up here? We'll say goodbye to our listeners if you're about ready to go.
Well, thank you. Marnie, I really appreciate you and your friendship. It's so much fun, and I appreciate your input. And Marnie has been wonderful over the years. And like I said, I really trust her opinion and judgment, and that's why she read The Secret Song of the Ditch Lilies years before it ever came out. And so I really appreciate it. But this has been a wonderful process, and I would just like to encourage people to, hey, read our books and let us know what you think. And we really appreciate the reviews. I know it helps us a lot when people give us reviews on Amazon and different places, and it's a little hard to do sometimes because you have to kind of get out of your comfort zone, but I really appreciate it when people take the time to do that.
Yeah, that means a lot to an author, I know that. And everybody run over to Amazon and search for The Secret Song of the Ditch Lilies, and be sure and get your copy.
Thanks, Marnie. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Jen.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.